I think the industry moves at such a fast pace now that what we're doing today will not be relevant in 6 months. There's like a mentality that I work on, which is called like trigger points. I always say, okay, what are the trigger points that will allow us to do the next thing and the next thing? And then you work towards that trigger point, get that thing locked in, and that allows you to unlock budget or reinvestment. Or I think the thing that really worked for us was that the players were really bought into it. Working with Hector Bellerin around when he had his ACL injury, and the mindset he was in, like the whole, like his whole world kind of collapsed on him in the sense that he can't play football for a year. And for us to kind of give him a bit of a purpose through the documentary, and okay, the reason why we want to do this is we want to show fans, yeah, you see this guy get injured in January and you won't see him again until another January. A year goes past very quickly in normal life, right? But this is all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you guys just will never appreciate.
So you followed him for a year?
Yeah, followed him for a year through, we had cameras in surgery theatre. We followed literally, I feel like, every touch point and every moment.
Interested in working in sport? Interested in becoming a founder? Well, this episode is going to be for you, because today we sat down with the founder of Be Engaged Sports, Ehsen Shah, and they're a sports marketing agency, and we discussed a whole host of things, from the common misconceptions with being a founder to the most rewarding things to the hardest things. Guys, this is one not to be missed. And, you know, like I always say, if you've been enjoying the content, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share. It does wonders for the channel. Back to the show. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of What My Best Friend Does, where we talk about what your best friends do so you don't have to. Today, I'm joined by my best friend, the founder, Ehsen. Welcome to the show, bro. How you doing?
Good, thank you. And thank you for having me on, man.
Mate, my pleasure. My pleasure. We like to start with an icebreaker. Yeah. What do you want to be growing up?
Actually, what I wanted to be growing up was a pilot.
Oh.
Yeah, very far field from what I do now. But
Little Top Gun.
I don't think I'll be a fighter pilot, but no. And I think it was when I was, you know, when you go through that phase in GCSEs of, okay, what is it that you want to do? Yeah. That was the thing. And for whatever reason, it drove me towards, okay, yeah, I want to do this thing. I think it was more traveling the world and seeing the world in a different way, et cetera, et cetera. And then I realized there's like a cap to how long you can do it because of the amount of air pressure on your lungs and everything like that.
Really?
And then I was like, I don't really want a career where I'm capped at 15, 16, 17 years. And if you think about how much you have to do before you even get on the bigger ones, it's a lot of EasyJet flights and Ryanair flights before you get to the bigger stuff. So you do all that for maybe 5 years peak in career. And I just thought, nah, maybe not for me.
Can I just say, you said that was your dream. It sounded like you did a lot of research going into it. Yeah. Like this was like serious, like you really thought about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I must have just been bored one day and I thought, let me just actually research into this. And I realized, okay, then you need to go into teaching and you need to do this. I was like,
okay, so you wanted to be a pilot. You've now obviously founded your own company. Can you talk me through your journey to this point and then how you came to be a founder?
Cool. So I think the thought or the idea started in uni.
What do you study at uni? Sorry to jump in there.
Business management and economics, right?
Okay.
So it was always driven by business, economics, numbers, markets, etc. So it was very driven towards the management consulting or investment banking route. And I think it was the first year and second year of unis, I did a few internships with Barclays, PwC, KPMG, and those type of guys, and I just realized that actually this isn't for me. Yeah. It was one of those ones where the approach that I took to an internship was, how do I vision myself in that person's shoes at that age in that phase of career? And I thought that's probably not me. So I think I came back from one summer and I spoke to a couple of people, you know, like you get the lecturers that help you on advice and stuff like that. So I tailored my degree more towards marketing side because there was a module which was around marketing comms and the economics behind marketing and how it like tailors markets, etc. And one element around it was sport. So I kind of like tailored something into sport. I thought, okay, let me try to play around with this a little bit. And it just kind of clicked. I was like, yeah, I get this. I like this. Or I see the world working in a certain way. And when I left uni, I started to kind of look at different places that might be offering this, but we're talking about 8, 9 10 years. I don't even know how long it's been now.
A while,
right?
Yeah.
And in that period of time, there was always the traditional agencies that worked within sport, i.e. on-field representation. I had no interest in that side of the field. It was more the marketing of how brands operate in the world of sport, etc. And at the time, there was no one really doing it. So there was 2 other businesses that I tried doing it with in the earliest parts of my career, and for various different reasons, just didn't work out. People had different motivations, etc. And I think it was 2 years, a year and a half or 2 years after uni, 2 of my friends just convinced me. They went, look, what have you got to lose? You may as well just do it yourself and give it a go and see what can happen. And at the time, I thought I was living with my parents' house. I was like, I don't actually have that many commitments. I don't have much to kind of outlay on. So it was an opportunity cost thing. So in economics, I was always taught opportunity cost, right? So I kind of applied it back to my own life, and I thought, okay, what's the opportunity cost? I go take a salary somewhere else and work in that field, but is that really what? Will I always have that thing of I didn't give that thing a go to give it a chance? And then 2 of my friends just kept convincing me onto me, like, do it, and I took the plunge and I did it. And then I think everything felt like a blur because the first few years were so hard, and then obviously it transpires into like something.
Wow, so there's so much to unpack just for that little bit. You said the first few years were hard, so it wasn't even like you started and it worked straight away. You had to grind it.
I think you have to really be kind of honest with yourself and say, okay, what does success look like at certain different points, right? So it's not just one thing and then you're like, yeah, I've made it, and then you can get caught out quite quickly in those situations. And I think the reality of running a business, it's never easy, and it never does get easy, because at the start you're always finding your feet and trying to work things out, and ultimately you make mistakes, right? And mistakes will teach you lessons, and you have to put those lessons into practice later on down the line. So I think those first few years were way ahead of the curve in the sense of where the industry is at now. Like 8 years on we played a part in it. We weren't the only reason, but the industry is what it is today, and we played a part in that, which started many years ago. So I think when you're ahead of the curve, it's harder because change is difficult for people, and trying to get an industry to change and trying to get people within the industry to change and change their mindset, mentalities, and a younger generation coming through. Like, being a bit older now, I now appreciate and understand why the older generation did see us in that way, because it was a big change. We're coming in, we're talking about social media, we're talking about digital, we're talking about content, we're talking about partnerships in a different way. And we're talking about humanizing athletes, when in a period of time athletes were just seen as, you play football, you do nothing else. And that was a huge shift mindset. Fans, clubs, players, everyone that works within the industry, right? So it took a few years to get the people on board to start to understand, okay, yeah, this can be done. But the players wanted to do it, so that's a great start, because that helps you along the way, for sure. But I would say a lot of the struggles at the start were more getting people to understand that this is a change. And it was always, I remember one of the first people I spoke to actually was like, this social media thing will die out.
No.
Like, why are you bothering with this? It will die out. It's got no place in football. And interestingly, like years on, those same people, it's interesting to see like how their mindset's developed, because they're thinking like marketing first and social first and everything like this. And it's nice to see the industry making the change, because obviously it helps everyone. But I think looking back at it now, it's worth the change, but it also makes you laugh that it took 3 years for people to get on board.
So obviously you're the founder of Be Engaged hyphen Studios as well. Can you describe to me, how would you describe what it is you lot do? So you just mentioned, the fact that you've had to change a lot of perspectives, but in a nutshell, what is it that you guys do?
We help brands come into sport. That's ultimately like the core ethos, right? So whether you're a brand that's traditionally worked within the sports field, like whether you're a sportswear brand or not, but also at the same time we've worked with fashion brands coming into sport, tech brands, gaming brands, etc. So our job is to take the brand, engage them with a sporting audience, and bridge that gap between whatever industry they're in and the industry that we're working in.
And I suppose you bridge the gap through collabs with like specific individuals within.
It can be like various different things. So I think the historic model has always been, you'll work with talent, you'll collab with talent, and talent will open the doors and the perception and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But as time's moving on, talent's not necessarily always the only option. You've got so many, like, you've got content creators in the world of sport, you've got podcasts, you've got YouTubers. The whole realm of digital content creation has kind of just exploded in the last few years. And I think everyone now plays a different role within the audiences, within the consumers, within the market space. So I think it's very much about understanding, okay, what's the brand trying to achieve? What are your objectives? Who are you trying to target? And work with them to figure out, okay, this is the best route for you. And sometimes there's been situations where a brand's come into it and we've kind of had to be honest and go, look, this probably isn't the right space for you guys to play, and you need to go play in a bit more of, I guess, organic route in another space, and then come back once you're a bit more set up. Otherwise, they'll come in, they'll try sport, it'll fail, and they'll go, that thing didn't work, and you set that brand back 3 years maybe, just because someone didn't advise them the right way.
And then sorry, I'm going back to it because like the way you started was just so hot. It was hard for a few years. So when you say it was hard, were you not making any money? Like, did you secure clients and contracts to sustain yourself at all, or were you so clear on your vision? I know you define success differently, that you were able to like sustain yourself.
Yeah, I think we were able to sustain ourselves, and it came down to, okay, me as an individual, I had to prioritize certain different things at different periods of time. So there was a period in time where the business was getting to a point that we needed to incorporate content into the wheelhouse of the business, right? So we had to hire staff, you had to kind of take on offices. So they're all costs, which again, coming back to that opportunity cost mentality of, okay, if I spend that money there, what does that then stop me from doing over there, 100%. Right? So there was an element of, I sacrificed myself to allow, okay, if that budget comes in, that will now go into that person's salary. If that comes in, that goes into that piece of equipment. Yeah. So the mentality always was try and bring it in-house, try and bring it into a controlled environment where we can kind of dictate, okay. And when you're working in a space and trying to make a change, you need everyone on board. You need people to buy into the mentality and the ethos, and working with externals sometimes is too detached, right? That person's there to do the job and the job only, and then they'll carry on and go do something else. So the mentality was, okay, let me bring this inwards, continuously reinvest. So that allowed us to grow to a point that I was able to then start to prioritize other things. Okay. So there's like a mentality that I work on, which is called like trigger points. I always say, okay, what are the trigger points that will allow us to do the next thing and the next thing? And then you work towards that trigger point, get that thing locked in, then that allows you to unlock budget or reinvestment. Or
can you give me an example of a trigger point?
Yeah, so when you mentioned Hyphen Studio, so Hyphen Studio sits within our holding group, and the trigger point for that was in terms of types of business that we were bringing in. So if you look at Be Engaged as a general brand, it's sports focused, right? So we don't work outside of the sports audience and the sports market. But the trigger point was the time that brands started to ask to work with us outside of sport. That would be the trigger point that would justify why we need to create a separate front-facing brand and a separate entity that works in its own kind of ecosystem. Yeah. And that was the trigger point. So as soon as we started to see, I think it was the fashion industry, FMCG goods, music, etc., started to say, okay, well, have you ever thought about doing this? That was the trigger point. And that opened up a completely different market for us, that the team now can work on briefs and projects that don't necessarily just rely on the sports element, if that makes sense. So that's just one example.
And do you feel like your degree that you did at university helped to prepare you well for being a founder?
It's actually a very good question, because I've thought about this so many times. You know, when it's a weird way of looking at it, but you know, when you look at your student loan and you go, okay, was that investment worth what it returned? And I think that this is just my own personal opinion, right? I think universities are great and degrees are great if you're going into medical, law, accountancy, those professions that you actually require it. And I think having been exposed to the teaching ecosystem through being asked to kind of like do different guest lectures, or I was asked to do like a few modules, etc., but I turned it down. What we would be building a textbook for or anything like that will be so outdated by the time the person's reading it. Yeah. So by the time you build the book, do the research, go to publishing and it's distributed and it goes into someone's lecture. We've already moved on, right? So I think the industry moves at such a fast pace now that what we're doing today will not be relevant in 6 months. Like you've probably seen it in the sense of, from like a social first perspective, what was working on Instagram a year ago, TikTok came in, blew it away, and now TikTok's kind of plateaued a little bit and everyone's trying different platforms, different things, and podcasts, for example, is kind of like the latest trend. How do you teach that to someone that's sitting in university and it takes them 3 years before they can ever apply that into the real world, right? So I think looking back at some of the points that I maybe took out of it, potentially it might have helped me in the first year or so in understanding just generally how does the business world work from a P&L perspective, finance perspective. But did I really need to spend 3 years to learn how to do a spreadsheet? Yeah. Probably not, right? So I think it's interesting as well because I come from a family where you're always told to have like a bit of a backup plan, right? So I think it's not that I was family pressurized, but because the whole process of going to university, learning that economics and that background in investment banking wasn't for me, helped me. So I would say, yeah, it was worth that return on investment in the sense that it allowed me to understand what I want to do with my life rather than from a technical aspect or anything like that, because a lot of the things that I know now today or I've known over the years has been on the job, and I learn more by talking to people, asking the right questions. That comes through networking, reading the right things, the amount of books that can teach you things. And I think people's experiences. So that's why I love the books where they apply a methodology or an approach to a real life example. So whether you're reading a book and they reference Dyson or, do you know what I mean? They're real life examples that you can see, oh, wow, that product came from that. And that's what it took to get to that. And I think that's what social media will never teach you. Yeah. Because it's in 10 seconds or in one caption or in one picture.
Social media is for lazy people. Yeah. Because I think there's no greater way to learn than by going through the process. And there's a couple of instances in my life where I'm doing that at the moment. One is religion. So I'm reading the Bible myself to come to my own decision as to whether like I'm a believer or not, because everybody tells you this and that, but everyone's quoting off a quote that they heard, and I'm like, I just want to come to the decision myself. But yeah, you're so right, man. And talking about what you were saying about books, one thing I want to ask you, because just from the few things you've said, when you read something, it really feels like it lands. How is it you go about like learning from a book or taking notes and making sure that things actually land when you're reading these books?
I think when I'm reading a book, I'm trying to read it in an environment where I'm not too distracted. So a lot of the time is when I'm traveling. So if you're on a plane, there's only so many things you can do, right? So a book's a good place to kind of like start with that. Where on the tube, the amount of times I used to read on the tube, it helps when you're at the start of the central line and you've got a seat, right? So that's a very good plus point to it. But I think what you need to do is you need to go in with the mindset of how does this apply to my life? Because if you just read it in the context that book's being written, it's just words relatable to the author, not to you. So you have to take the element that is relatable to you and apply that to your life. Once you've applied it to your life, note that down. So a lot of the times I used to just use the notes app on my phone. I would just apply that to that. And a lot of the times it would be a case of try to apply it into your life straight away, because it's pointless in reading it, applying it, putting it down somewhere. The reality is you're not going to go back to it. So you have to try and apply it in those instances. And the other thing that I would always try to do is read the book that's applicable to that moment in my life. So there's I wouldn't say that majority of the times that plays out, right? But say, for example, you're going through a struggle in not too sure whether you want to, so a good one is, I guess, topical for these days is whether you want to leave your job and start your own business. The amount of people that will go to social media for that, but it's exactly how you said, where you're reading the Bible. If you go to social media and you read something that is out of context, right? Because you've not read the 5 other paragraphs that go before it and the 5 other ones afterwards. That's why I think social media is a kind of a trap, in the sense that someone will say, oh, the first years are too hard. And then that's the only snippet that you get. And then the person thinks, oh, it's too hard, like, why bother? Or another person says, we did $1 million in the first year. Okay, was that $1 million on a loss? Was that $1 million, what was the size of the market? Should you have been making 5 million? Should you be making 250K? Did you run a 4 million loss and you took 5 million investment? So, you know, like all those things are so out of context. That's why I think social media is a bit of a trap. But apply that book to your life. So try and read something that's relevant to the situation that you might be in.
Do you read the whole book when you read a book, or are you just like looking for that specific thing that you can apply?
I think I will always get to the end of the book, but it doesn't mean I read all of the book. So there might be elements of it that I start reading, usually by the first page of a chapter, you kind of know what that chapter is going to be talking about. I'll start skim reading it and seeing that's not applicable, that's not applicable, that's not applicable. But there'll be other books where all of it's applicable. Yeah. So I'll read it all once, and then potentially sometimes I'll go back to the key points, which I have noted down to say, okay, they're the main ones. Let me go back to that. But I think falling into a trap of having to always read the entire book, not every book is going to have 200 pages which are relatable to you.
100%. Yeah. And as a founder, to anybody who's listening to this, you've mentioned the fact that there are different books with different stages. For somebody who is, thinking about starting a business, potentially leaving their job, do you have any books that you would recommend for that specific section that we could? I
think when you're starting out a business, it depends on the industry and the type, right? So if I just use service-based industries, it's a very people-to-people kind of process. If you're being honest, there's nothing that you're not doing anything that someone else can't do. Yeah. Right. In a service-based world, unless you're Mark Zuckerberg and you've got Meta, yeah, okay, cool, you're doing something different. But the reality is that people are going to buy into people. So there's a book called, I can't remember the author's name, but I think it's called How to Influence People.
Oh, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah, it's like a red cover, right? Yeah. And I think that book really teaches you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. In those situations, it's far easier to listen to people than just constantly blurt out, because you're not actually even sure what the other person's interested in. Yeah. So I think that book is super helpful, because once I read that, it reaffirmed in my head that less is more. And I think sometimes when you're running a business, you oversell and you over exaggerate and you kind of overcomplicate things sometimes, because it's so daunting in the sense that one day can be cloud nine, the next day you can be like, I don't want to even try to do this, right? So I think it's one of my friends actually had like this phrase in terms of a candle. If a candle burns too fast, it'll burn out. If it burns too slow, it'll die out. You have to have like a consistency to the candle. I like in the sense that that's with energy, and you take the highs with the highs and the lows with the lows, you'll quickly burn out of energy. You kind of have to be very consistent. And I think at the start you can really overcomplicate things, and in those situations the other person can usually sense that. So how many times you probably get spam calls on the phone and someone calls you and it's like this. I can usually sense the desperation on the other side. I'm like, well, it can't be that good, because you're struggling to even believe in your own product. So I think that core ethos of how to communicate with people, speak with people, but also learn to listen, because use the 10 seconds or 30 seconds to explain what you do, but then after that, listen to the feedback.
100%. I feel like definitely in a lot of things, people don't like they don't like uncomfortable situations, and sometimes you just have to like hold silences, because that's something that I've learned to do. You say what you want to say, and then you just shut up, and you let people you let people break whatever, because when they're talking, you're gathering information. But yeah, I 100% agree on that. Where did I want to go after that? So you've spoken about like the fact that you were able to take these risks because you were at home when you started. Were your family supportive? Because you mentioned the fact that they wanted you to have a backup plan. Like, did they support you being a founder, or were they like, get like, come on?
Yeah, no, 100% they supported me. I think looking back, I actually said this to my mum and dad a few years ago, in the sense that I didn't realize in the moment, you don't really realize certain situations that are playing out, right? But I think looking back, I now appreciate how supportive they were, in the sense that they allowed me to try it. They allowed me to test it. They didn't question it. They didn't kind of put pressure on me or anything like that. And I don't know if that comes from my dad's background, because when I was 2 weeks old, my dad left Canon to start his own business. Oh, wow. Right. So I guess he's not in a position to say anything. And I think my mum's already gone through that process with someone to understand that this thing of doing something by ourselves kind of exists within our families. Like, my granddad had it, my dad had it, and I think their experience allowed them to kind of treat me and my brother in a certain way. My brother's gone down a very different route where he's done like Goldman Sachs, Deloitte. So he's gone down the route that I thought I was going to go down. The traditional,
yeah.
So I think they've had one son kind of risk it all, and the other one come in and kind of like play the safe route. And I think they supported us both and they're polar opposite ways, right? So I think they've kind of supported us both in those directions. But looking back at it, I'm kind of like, why didn't you question me?
Yeah.
But I think at the time it's what I needed, because I think if people started to question it, I think where everyone was supportive, like my friends, my family, everyone was so supportive of it that it allowed me to not understand I was taking a risk. Because I think looking back, I don't realize that
the risk
it was a risk. Yeah.
And it allowed, when you don't realize like the gravity of what you're doing, it allows you to move quickly.
Yeah.
Because you're not weighed down by like decisions, right?
And more confidently, because I think if you live in a life where you're trying to prove someone wrong, you'll make mistakes, and you'll make mistakes which cost you more. Whereas if the heart's in the right place, you'll naturally do things for the right reason, rather than I'm doing that to prove that person wrong. If that's your motivation,
you're going to slip up.
Yeah, you're going to slip up.
Where did I want to go from there? So, what was the tipping point where you go from this is like, it's touch and go to, okay, the industry is ready to accept this kind of new wave that we've been trying to push in these new mediums?
I think in the first few years, we were always working off of the spare budget or the scrap, like the last bit where they go, that's an experiment, or we've got X amount and our financial year is about to change, or we have to use it. Just you guys have been banging on about this for 6 months. You guys take it. I think the tipping point was probably 3 years in, kind of 2019-ish. So maybe like 4 years in, 2019 time, where it was, okay guys, we're coming to you with the campaign brief, you are going to lead this, so you're now the lead of the campaign rather than a supplementary thing further back down the line. And I think the types of brands as well were leveling up, and the people in the industry that were recognizing what we were doing was at a good level. So I would say everything kind of fell nicely into place around 2019 in that sense. So we hired more people, we got a new office, were able to level up on the equipment that we had within the production team at the time, because that was before Hyphen. Players were more starting to understand like what we do, and the briefs were, you're now leading this. So I would say that was kind of like the tipping point.
Amazing. And then, so pre 2019, you mentioned the fact that people started to come to you with the briefs. How is it you went about winning business and like getting those initial clients over the first few years?
I think it's all networking, because ultimately going out cold works to an extent, but there's certain decision makers that you need to just get in front of. And it was always a case of work the network to get into another network. So I think one of the things that I was always afraid of doing at the start, but ultimately it drove me into a position that you just have to do it, asking people for favors and being like, look, do you mind if you just introduce me into that person? Or I know that person's working there. Have you ever had any experiences? So I think relationships is key, because too many times I think, especially where the world's in at the moment and the young generation coming through, everything's now. Sometimes you can hold a relationship with someone and something might not happen for a year, but that person on the other end sometimes values that more, because it's a case of, oh, they didn't just stop talking to me the first time I said no, right? And the way that we're just engineered in these modern times is, if that doesn't happen, leave it, move on to the next one. It's too disposable, whether it's clothing, life, whatever. We're in a very kind of like fast paced, disposable way of living. And I think having the flip opposite, patience, is virtue. And I think they were the things where networking, trying to find the right contacts, researching, trying to use the doors that are already open to us to try and leverage that and use another door, and being very proactive in the sense of, okay, this is happening, here's an idea for it, rather than saying, I can do this. Go with the idea and say, okay, look, these are some ideas, thought starters, thought provokers. 9 times out of 10, actually more than 9 times out of 10, they'll never go with the first idea. So it's about showcasing your capabilities. It's always, I don't know if you had it when you were younger, when you were starting out in your career, the thing that I was always told was bring what you bring to the table.
Yeah.
If you're not bringing anything to the table, there's no motivation for the other person to speak to you. There's enough people going to their table
I mean, I have it now.
It's always in case of life. Even now to this day, if I'm speaking to a brand or I'm speaking to a club or whatever, it's a case of, okay, what are we bringing to the table? Because you're functioning multi-billion pound dollar company sometimes.
Yeah.
Who am I to say do this with us, right? You have to show the value and you have to show that ability. So I think everything is about understand one, what that person wants to achieve. So again, it comes back to that influencing and kind of like how to win friends, and then two, what are you bringing to the table to fix that.
Yeah, you were talking about networking. You were talking about making sure you show value. I suppose like how is it that you spoke about being in an industry where people didn't know what the value was if it hit them on the head. So like, do you just have to, going back to what we were saying, be like naive in the sense that you just have to be kind of like almost delusional in that you just believe in what you're showing them has value? Yeah,
I think looking back, probably. Delusion. It was one of those things. It was either going to work or it wasn't. I don't think there was any halfway house in the sense of, there'll be some slight change and not the full way. I think the thing that really worked for us was that the players were really bought into it. And ultimately, there was the philosophy that we had that players will define what sports culture, sports consumerism, and the whole fandom around sports will be in. Now we are living in that time. So if you go and speak to a young kid in terms of what team do they support, it will most likely be different to the team that their parents support, right? Or their family have kind of supported over the years. And why is that? FIFA.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that what it is?
I say FIFA, EA Sports, right?
Yeah. No, but bro, do you know what? It's so funny you say that because I find it so funny when I go to. So I'm a Manchester United fan because obviously, like, I'm from Manchester. Joke. No, I'm not. But I find it so funny, like when I go to America and people are like, I support the Manchester City, and I'm like, oh my god, you're a modern day glory hunter. You're what I was 10, 15 years ago. It's pretty crazy.
One, there's a success, right? On pitch success obviously helps. Two is games like EAFC, Football Manager have changed the way sports seen, because if that player is not a good player for you in your FIFA Ultimate Team, you're probably not going to rate them.
True.
Right? Yeah. And then if they are a good player in your Ultimate Team and you play well with them, you're going to love them. So I think it was a few times that when I've been traveling, I've seen Haaland City shirts, and it's to your point, I'm not going to see Haaland City shirts in the UK, but I'm seeing them everywhere else. So I think the thing that did really work for us in the time and kind of allowed us to keep believing in this was the players, and ultimately players hold the most power in the game, right?
100%. So I have to ask, like you mentioned the players, how do you get those initial relationships that players are backing you?
I guess the easiest way to break it down was we didn't really overcomplicate things. We kind of made it easy. We were real about what we were trying to do, and it was all about friend of friends and networks of networks, right? So word of mouth is the best thing, and if you can get that word of mouth going, that ultimately starts to spitball. And it's in an industry which they see someone else doing something, they want the same thing, right? So we're playing in an industry which is very much about that person's doing that, why am I not doing this? And then that starts to change the perception of the people that we were trying to change the perception of years before that, in the sense that they're now coming to you and saying, so-and-so seen that and they want now this, do you mind having a conversation? So then the dynamic starts to flip a little bit, and now all these years on, most of our work on player side is inbound. They're coming to us. But those relationships start by, I think, you having that patience, one, two, not overcomplicating it. By what I mean overcomplicating, between the lines, I'm saying don't like make things up and sell a dream and all those things that go with it, right? Just be, I guess, authentic to, okay, this is what's realistic, this is what we can do, and people buy into that, because I at the same time would rather be told something's not realistic, this is achievable and this is the thing that we're working towards, rather than I know when I'm being sold a dream. If
like there's people listening to this, they're like, oh my God, this sounds fun.
Mm.
Like, I want to get into it. I think when we were speaking off camera, you know, you spoke about the fact that there are like opportunities that arise. Is now a time where people could start something from scratch, or has the ship kind of sailed?
I think we're still seeing people start from scratch in the industry at the moment. I would say, what's the different, what's the USP that you're bringing to the table, right? Because if it's just going to be a copy and paste of what someone else is doing, then someone else already owns that market space. And that was the key thing, that when we were looking to scale or grow, what's like the why would we do that? What is it? Just a case of just going into someone else's space, but they're already there, they're already a leader in that environment. So I'd say there is still opportunities to do it, but the kind of like doors slowly closing, I think, and I think it's nearly closed in the industry at this point in time, because it's a bit oversaturated in that space, and there's not enough supply. There's oversupply and not enough demand at where the industry is going. So I think we'll have like a bit of a market reset in a next 12 to 18 months or so, in the sense that there were people that started and maybe it didn't quite work out, and it'll go back to the starting point. But to your point as well, like when we were talking off camera, I think there's this obsession with being the founder or being the person that starts something. And I think sometimes there's far more opportunities for growth in being part of something than necessarily having to create your own thing, especially in a market which might be saturated. You're not going to necessarily define and create a USP. You're taking on a lot of risk, and it's going to probably be a detriment to your personal life as well, than going into somewhere that's already established. Take your new ideas into there, because that entity might be able to actually fast track it a little bit quicker than in other areas. So I think, sometimes there's this obsession with always having to create something, when you just have to be realistic of, is there the opportunity or not?
So what I've taken from that, and it's so profound, like, you don't always have to be the founder, and you can go further being under someone else, like, versus doing it yourself and failing because it's just not the right time.
Yeah. And that, I also appreciate, it might be a bit weird coming from someone that's already done it, right? Yeah. But I think when I look at people within our team, and the people that have been so successful within our teams and been with us for many years, it's because they have that entrepreneurial mindset, they have the ideas, and they have the infrastructure and the facility to bring those ideas to life. An idea is a great idea, but unless someone's going to implement it, the idea is pointless. And sometimes you are in situations where that's not possible by yourself, whether that's investment, finances, flexibility, or whatever else it might be, by going into another area. So there's people within our team that have been able to kind of put so many different ideas that I wouldn't even think of. Categorically, I would never come up with that idea or that direction or that route or whatever else it might be, but they have, because they've got that entrepreneurial mindset. They are almost running their own business unit. They've got their own P&Ls. They are running their own mini business within a business, and they've still got that freedom to be able to do stuff. They've still got that security to kind of feel that they have that flexibility to do that.
The autonomy,
But then also at the same time, they're able to live out the dream that they've got. So I think I can only use the examples that we're working with, right? Obviously, some other companies might not be in that situation. But I think sometimes it's a case of just evaluate the options rather than thinking it's either that or that. Yeah,
I love it. And the two questions I had. So you mentioned the fact that like in 2019 you had to scale and expand the team. As a founder, I know you mentioned like opportunity cost. How do you decide on like how many to expand the team by? Like how does the modeling go when you're going through that process?
In our situation, it's ultimately a self-funded business. It doesn't have a VC behind it or institutional investment or anything like that. So we can only work off of our last year's financial accounts. So we would have a look at it and go, okay, again, trigger points. If we hit a certain amount, we can then hire X, Y, Z. If we bring in that work, we can bring in those type of people. So our scale was always defined by those trigger points, whether that's financial, whether it's client wins. We wouldn't go into it too hypothetically in the sense of, okay, we're going to go do all these things that will then potentially maybe lead to that you're going to cripple the business very quickly. So that's our philosophy and our strategy, and to this day is still that same philosophy and strategy.
So basically like bootstrapping, right, and growing within your means.
Yeah. And I think people might find that a bit weird when you've been running a business for so long, but I think as soon as you come out of that mentality, it's what worked. And it's what's been so successful for us, and it allows everyone's bought into that mindset as well. Because when I'm talking about people that have been here for many years and they've been successful and they've got that entrepreneurial mindset, it's because that allows them to understand, okay, I don't need to go and spend all this money by doing that.
Do it yourself,
If we had people that didn't understand that, they'd be spending a ridiculous amount on equipment, and it'd be like, well, was that equipment ever going to be used that we needed to justify bringing that onto our balance sheet? So
the next question I had, you've obviously spoken about the fact that you've got people who they're almost like a boss within your own business. As a founder, when you're like building out your initial team, how is it you went about finding that team to support you and make sure that you had the right people?
I think, honestly speaking, I probably didn't have a clue what I was doing when I was trying to recruit people way back when. So I was going off a gut feeling, in the sense of, can I get on with that person? Do we see the world in the same way? I guess taking the philosophy that we've got in working with the players, are they a good human? Fundamentally, I can't teach that to someone. That's how they're born and that's how they've been raised. But the other parts I can teach them. So if we're halfway there already, in the sense that they're a good human being, I can teach them the other side of things and expose them to situations that allow them to teach themselves as well. So a lot of it was built off of gut feeling. A lot of it was built off of really liking the person on the other end.
And now, has that changed, or is it still the same? Because obviously you've got a lot bigger team.
Now I'm not in charge of recruitment, right?
Fair.
So there's different people, they have different ways of recruiting. And one of the things I always said to the guys was that the only advice I can give you is don't try to copy someone else's recruitment process. Because fundamentally you need to understand what are the key things that you're looking for in your team when you're building out your team. And as the manager, how are you going to manage those people? If you think, look, don't get me wrong, some people are unmanageable. If you think that person doesn't fit your managing style, then that's probably not the right fit for your team. So we implemented like different things, in the sense of we have a various phase process. In some of those phases are task-based phases, so to get an understanding from a technical perspective. But then at the same time, there was a book I read a few years ago. I've completely forgotten the name of the book, but the concept of it was that you can't have the same types of personalities in one team, right? Because everyone will think the same way. So if you're sitting in a team and someone says 2 + 2 = 5, and you've all come from the same background, same education, see the world in the same way, you're all going to say it's 5.
It might be, and I could be... I've read a book recently called Rebel Ideas.
That's the one.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Where they talk about the CIA.
Yeah. I've actually read it. Great book.
Yeah.
Rebel Ideas. I'm gonna put that in the notes. Just give me some kickbacks.
Amazon.
Yeah.
That's actually the book. Matthew Said, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Matthew Said.
But so we implemented personality tests. You can't cheat a personality test, and you don't know what the other person's looking for. All we're looking for is how are we going to balance our team out, that we can build the best team, the most diverse team, to help deliver for our clients.
That's so sick. And talking about like hiring people, one thing I've heard from like lots of founders as well, sometimes they feel like they hang on to people too long, and those things can be difficult. What's your approach to difficult circumstances, and I suppose having to let people go, I suppose, is the question.
It's the hardest part of the job. I think one of the questions that you sent to me before was, what's the hardest part of the job? Is the people side. It's the most challenging part, because you grow emotional attachments to people. You learn different things about their life, that they might be saving up to buy a house or planning to have a family. Like, all these things kind of play into your head. And when you're in a big corporate, it's usually HR that deals with it. HR so detached, they haven't got a clue what's going on in that person's life. So transactional. In a smaller business, there is that cliche of, okay, it's like a family, this, that, and the other. But it is because you spend so much time with everyone. You're all bought into the same cause, and you're trying to, if I help you out, I know indirectly it's helping me out and it's helping the business out. So everyone's in it together type situation, which makes it far more difficult. But also at the same time, there's other situations where you can just see the writings on the wall so early on that this isn't going to work out, and it's not so difficult because you just don't ever get into those situations that you have that attachment. So I think I tend to say internally as well, there's 3 ways life will work out whilst everyone's at the business. The business goes in this way and you go in that way, everyone's happy. You go in that way and the business goes in that way, you're going to want to leave. Business goes in that way, you go in that way, you're the one that's going to leave. So life's pretty simple sometimes, and you kind of just have to see it in that way to simply put it, how are we going to make things work? But it is the toughest part. Only a small number of people ever stay at a business for the entire life cycle, right? Many people will move on for their own reasons. They might want to leave, and then vice versa. But I think you have to be very logical about the solution, in the sense that, have you tried everything that you can potentially make this work? If you haven't, you've exhausted all avenues. It's not good for that person's like personal life, their mental health and how they're feeling, everything like that. Why put them through that the same way you go through it, right? And I think in certain situations, in our business anyway, you can be a bit more flexible in a sense of finding a solution to it on an exit plan, rather than it's like this, off you go. So I think we've been through so many different variations of types of experiences, and I think it never gets easier. And it's always the hardest part.
That was like the people side. You mentioned like at the start of the conversation that there were some difficult moments that you don't mind like sharing. Can you talk us through some of the your most difficult times as a founder? I
think COVID was the most obvious one. We spoke about scaling Trigger Points being 2019, and obviously the 2020 after that, right? So we went through one trigger point and a tipping point, in the sense that success came with it. We went in the other route, which was super difficult. So going back earlier on when I said, we hired more people, we bought new equipment, we got a new office, everything, and then changed it 6 months later. So I would say that was the hardest time, because you've brought on new people into the business based off of success that you're seeing, that business is no longer there 6 months down the line. You try to make it work in certain various situations, but I think we must have let go about 20% or 25% of our workforce in that period of time. We had a legal battle with the office lease people, like whoever was the landlord. So there was kind of so many moving components where you're trying to hemorrhaging cash. You're trying to plug holes left, right and center. You've got a team asking you what's going on, like what's next. There was so much uncertainty, and there were so many times that you're doing it over Zoom as well, right? So it's so much harder that someone asks you a question and I genuinely don't know. So I'm the type of person, if I don't know something, I will just say, look, right now I don't know. When I do know, trust me, I'm going to communicate to everyone. So I think there was personally everyone went through something in COVID in their personal mind, right? And then in the workspace, you're also the brunt of everyone's problems. So you're kind of like, okay, this is the world's caving in on me type situation. And then you've got accountants saying to you, look, be careful of this. What about this? What about that? So I think there was the whole financial issue of money coming in, money going out. You've just signed this lease to this place. How are you going to get? And it's central London. Like, we were in Holborn back then, right? So you've got this central London office, which has a ridiculous rent. So there was that. Looking back, I'm not too sure how I got through it, but
that was going to be my question. Like, how did you get through it? And like, what was I suppose, let's rephrase it. What would be your key learning from that time? Because it's like a black swan event, right? Nothing can prepare you for that. But if you look back, like, would you look back saying, I would have done this differently, or I would have done that differently?
I think it was the first time I'd probably say that I ever didn't work off of a worst case scenario, and it reconfirmed to me that I should always work off a worst case scenario. So ever since then, 4 years on, I will always work on worst case scenario. And stupidly, where we were talking about the candle burning, etc., I think that must have been my one mistake, where I let it get to me a little bit. I was like, okay, cool, this is now moving. You get a bit excited, and I probably invested into things that we shouldn't have invested into. We probably scaled a bit too quickly, and it backfired a little bit. And when I say 2019, our financial year goes November to October, right?
Yeah.
So it was November 2019 I started doing all this, and then March 2020. So you're talking 6 months. It's not even a year played out, 6 months played out. So I think definitely it reconfirmed the point of worst case scenario. And I think it's a good way to live life, because if you plan for the worst, anything else on top of that is a bonus, right? And I know when you're a kid and in school or whatever, you're always told to aim for like A-star or I don't even know what the grade system is anymore. You're always told to aim for 100%, and if you get 90%, it's a success. I'm kind of like, okay, cool. If we hit this and anything above that, bonus. So I think that was the one thing it really taught me in terms of staying consistent and don't get carried away with things, because it's so easy in life to get carried away with stuff, whether it's in personal life, work life, or whatever. And I think being humble and just always anticipating something might be around the corner, I think that's the best way.
And like, so just like going back to COVID as well, did you have work in that year, or did things just shut down?
Yeah, I think the blessing was we took all the hits early on.
Okay.
Because if you imagine football stadiums close down, football's off, everyone panics, right? And in that period of time, brands even stopped paying football clubs. Clubs had massive issues where sponsors weren't even paying them. They're like, well, in theory, technically, by contractual perspective, you're not delivering on football matches and this, that. So by contract, they're right. So from top to bottom, everyone just stopped paying. Everyone stopped doing anything.
It became the Wild West.
Everything that you had planned was, how would we even do that? So I think where we were hit so hard so quickly, it allowed us to pivot, and we were able to pivot a bit quicker than everyone else, where others maybe didn't take the hit earlier on because their clients might be a bit more diverse away from sport, because there was still TV was still booming, gaming was through the roof and things like that, right? Our hits allowed us to regroup and then re-strategize and say, okay, these are the solutions to our problems. Let's now go into market and provide a solution to all these rights holders that can't do this. So I think we were the first ones to come out with a remote shoot and an activation in that period of time, with head and shoulders around something to do with the England national team. And what we were able to do was send a camera to the player's house with a couple of instructions of place it like this, shoot like this. This was like we're also talking about a time where self-shot content wasn't a thing, right? Self-shot content's a big thing now, but back then it wasn't. And we were able to package that together and put it together and get something out. And I think that was the instigator for people understanding, okay, you can do remote shoots, you can do this, and this works in that way. And because we're a smaller agency, we're able to pivot quicker, we're nimble, we can quickly sign off on buying vlog cameras, we can do this, we can do that. Whereas maybe bigger agencies, it's harder for them. This isn't in scope of work, legal this, legal that. And all that goes out the window for us. And we were able to take more inbound stuff around there. So we did a load of stuff with EA, which was back then FIFA 20, doing a load of charity-based streams. Then gaming really started to pop off. Then we launched David Beckham's esports team, which is called Guild Esports. During COVID, when you're dealing with esports, it's like the best thing, right? Because everyone's gaming, everyone's streaming, everyone's watching Twitch.
I spent so much money on Ultimate Team during lockdown. Oh my God.
But do you know what I mean? Everyone was gaming. I think I went back to Call of Duty. All my friends from that school that I used to play COD with, we were back on playing COD and stuff like that. So I think the whole world just gravitated towards gaming, and we were in that space, and we were at the forefront of it. And especially when it came to sport gaming, football gaming, it was the thing that everyone wanted to watch, and we were kind of there. So I think that helped us, where yes, the first, I don't know, I can't remember how long COVID was, just say the first half of COVID, we took hits left, right and center. We were hemorrhaging cash for fun. Then after that, we were able to pivot and start bringing on work, because we were seen as the people that, you can do this. Let's just go to you. It was a proven case that we were the first movers. So, you know, when someone can do it and everyone sees it, it's like, I'll just go to them.
And because you had that first mover advantage, right? So because people seen that you did it, everyone was coming to you, and then you got more and more business off the back of it.
Yeah, precisely.
Bloody hell, mate. Do you know what? I'm listening to you, and I'm just like shaking. Like, being a founder just sounds crazy, man. Like, it's not for everyone, is it?
No, I think when you're talking about risk, I think risk is so variable to so many different people, right? What is risky to me might not be risky to someone else, but also at the same time, what I'm doing might be seen like bonkers. Like, why would you even risk doing that, or et cetera, et cetera. So I think risk is so variable to many different people. So yeah, you have to have that element of risk. Every day is a risk for you, and also it's a responsibility that we have to pay 25 different people's salaries. We've got to make sure that they are looked after, they can live their life. We've got parents, we've got people that are buying houses, we've got so many people getting married, like it's a tough responsibility to take on. And then at the same time, I've got a home, I've got my family. I don't think it's made for everyone. I think you've really got to have resilience. You've got to have patience. You've got to have this mindset that you are not first. You're not someone else's first thought. Whereas at least when you're an employee, the company have to protect you. You've got rights. You've got the law protecting you, right? I don't have much protecting me. Mad. Apart from an insurance policy, which you pay a premium on and probably don't even get, but you need to get out of it. So, yeah.
I'm just at a loss for words. I think the first thing I want to go to is doing the work you do. You've mentioned like the England national team. You've mentioned David Beckham. Like, you work with like some incredible people. What is it like? I suppose, like, I mean, people I think always aspire to want to work with this person and that person. You don't have to give like specific examples, but what is it like working with like Premier League footballers? And I
think, look, if I'm totally honest, some are amazing to work with. Some are some of the best people that I've ever met. Others are very difficult to work with. And I think you have to have a balance in understanding where the line is and just understand, okay, that person needs to be treated in that way, so we treat that person in that way. And you have to be a bit of a chameleon. It's always shape-shifting and making sure.
Is it ever like so bad that you're like, no, we're not working with this person?
No. Or
it is? Oh, okay, damn.
Yeah,
and you've got...
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times in our team, I think that's one of the actual USPs that we can bring to a brand, that we're so honest in the sense that, okay, yeah, that person's, don't work with that person. We won't get the deliverables, we won't get this, we won't get that. And it'll just be a bit of a disaster of a campaign, whereas others are amazing to work with and you recommend them and go, yeah, that person's great, their team's great, their infrastructure spot on, we'll get everything that we need to get out of it. And I think slowly the rest of our team have started to understand that as well, in the sense of you're there to do the best job possible. So even if the person is difficult, how are you going to bypass that and just ensure that X, Y, Z is done right, if that makes sense?
You've basically already answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is it that you think sets Be Engaged apart from other agencies?
I think we get the cultural side of things, because we're working with the players. We understand them as people, as how they see the world. We understand their audiences because we're working across. We see the social data, we see the feedback, we see consumer sentiment, we see fan sentiment. When we put out campaigns, we're able to see the back end of things that others can't see. So I think that allows us to really understand consumer culture, like fan culture. So I'd always say it's like in the tagline, engaging sports fans with, engaging brands with sporting audiences, right? That's the part that we're really good at, in bringing the brand and getting them engaged with that audience, which I think is a testament to the team, because the team's built in a way that they really live and breathe what we're trying to do, and they understand that we're not trying to be traditional. We're not trying to kind of like play in the same space as other people. We're trying to bring brands like Crocs that never have worked in sport and bring them into football, and now they understand, okay, yeah, we can play a role in football, and this is how it can work, and that's how it can work.
You heard it here first. Crocs is on the way. And then like talking about like campaigns, can you like, is there like a campaign that just brings you joy that you can speak on?
I think I'd have to break it down into two. One is, if I just look at it from like the athlete side, I think working with Hector Bellerin around when he had his ACL injury and the mindset he was in, and like the whole, like his whole world kind of collapsed on him, in the sense that he can't play football for a year. And for us to kind of give him a bit of a purpose through the documentary and build something that in the initial stages we didn't quite know what we were building and why we were doing it. We were doing it more for the sake of, okay, let's just see where this can go and be an experiment. And I think that once it went live and we understood, okay, the purpose, I think it was halfway through the production of everything, we started to understand, okay, the reason why we want to do this is we want to show fans yeah, you see this guy get injured in January and you won't see him again until another January. A year goes past very quickly in normal life, right? But this is all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you guys just will never appreciate.
So you followed him for a year?
Yeah, followed him for a year through. We had cameras in surgery theatre. We followed literally, I feel like, every touch point and every moment. And we built out like a 9-episode documentary out of it. And to see the appetite from streaming platforms to wanting to take it on, for us to go self-published, seeing how many millions of views it got, the sentiment and the kind of like the feedback that we got out of the market, I think it was quite satisfying, because not only have you helped someone get through one of the toughest moments in their life, but also all the reaction on the other end, in the sense of someone else is in the comments on YouTube saying, oh yeah, I had my ACL, and seeing you go through it kind of like helped me do this and helped me do that. And I think it connected with fans in a different way, other than just, here's this footballer, they had a good 90 minutes or they had a bad 90 minutes, and here's this footballer living their life and whatever. You're actually seeing kind of the behind the doors that no one really gets to see. Yeah, you get snippets of it. If you're an Arsenal fan, you might see them post like once every 6 weeks, oh, here he is now doing this. You don't get that feeling. And I think that was the thing. And I think in there he spoke about depression and like how he was just drinking a lot and stuff like that. And a lot of people don't hear footballers talking that way, but it's a problem that so many of them face. They have so many different life problems and life 100%. Situations, right? Yeah. And they're living in a high pressure environment. So that from like the player side. And I think from a brand side, it's an interesting one. I'd probably say Crocs is a good example, because I think it was one of those brands that everyone went to us, we didn't expect that one. And I think that's ultimately what we're there to do, right? I think with the fashion stuff, when we've worked with big fashion houses or whatever, people kind of expect that out of us now. And I think the Crocs one was so out the box that people went, yeah, I would never have thought of that one. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. That's pretty cool. And to get them into sport and now seeing them flourish and seeing some of the projects that they want to kind of bring to life, I'm like, it was that instigating first point that really worked, and now we're Catalyst and we're part of that, and that's all great.
So, on that, like, how do you continue to push the boundary?
Yeah, we will hit a limit in it. There's only so many brands that you can work with, right? Unless the world starts innovating in a rapid way. But I think there was a quote in a book that I read once, that the disruptor becomes the institution, and I feel like slowly we're getting to that point that we're running out of things to disrupt in a way. And that's for various different reasons, because other people have started to now be the disruptors, etc., etc. So I think we will hit that ceiling, and I think we have to be smart and understand, okay, where to invest time, where not to invest time. So now that we've restructured the business, brought in more experience, brought in a chief revenue officer, she's great because she's had huge corporate experience in working at football clubs, etc., and understanding, okay, percentage use of time, percentage return on investment. Now we're kind of going to that next level where you have to protect the business from a revenue standpoint, but also at the same time, how can we still push those barriers that...
Are you looking to... I feel like a lot of what you do is around like football. Are you looking to push out of that to other sports?
So last year we did cricket and Formula One. Cricket, working more with Puma with Virat Kohli. So you go for
just the best cricketer in the world, no big deal.
So we always said that if we were going to do different sports, we do it right and we do it at the right time. And then in Formula One, it was with EA, so it was an existing relationship, and leveraging that into a series with them around the F1 23 game. And now this year, one of my colleagues, Jordan, he's been onto me for years to do combat sports or boxing, right? And I've always went, look, I'm not going to do it for the sake of doing it. Yeah. Let's wait until the right person. So we've now started working with Ben Whittaker, who we think is going to be like the next one through there.
He's crazy. Yeah. And mate, I think I saw something that you lot posted, like within like a month of working with him, he got to like 1 million social media followers. Is that real?
That, to be fair, I've got nothing to do with that. It's more my colleague.
But your
colleague
team,
Jordan Harvey,
have helped to like elevate him.
Yeah.
That was insane. But he's the one who does all that.
Yeah, that kind of helps, right?
If
he's doing that in the ring and he's going to go viral. So that was part of our thought process in working with him, is in a sense that, is he a character, is he an entertainer, what's he like as a human? And that helps because that plays in the role within that. And I think we then did a collaboration with him with Deagle Fragrances. He was at Milan Fashion Week. Jordan's also done something with him with Hublot. So it's like, okay, we're now pushing the boundaries, which those brands might have been seen as endemic brands in football, but they're not in boxing. Yeah. So it's, okay, how can we now do something slightly different there? The same way with Kohli and Puma in the cricket space, we did like something slightly different to what the cricket world's seen. So yeah, we're now starting to move out of football, but the core philosophy of a lot of things that we did in football is now just being applied into different spaces and trying to elevate other sports.
With all of the things that you're doing and pushing the boundaries, what's the RO? How do you measure success?
It's a great question. I think you have to define success in various different pillars.
It's different for each campaign.
Yeah, it's different in each area. I think there'll be areas that you're playing purely from a revenue perspective, and that's like, ultimately, as a business, you have to make money. Then there's areas that you're playing from like a positioning in the market of, you're not going to make a lot of money on it, but this is a perception play that people understand that you can play in this space, etc., etc. So a lot of the fashion work that we did way back when was a positioning play, which has now allowed us to maybe potentially move that into a revenue play. And then you've got the third bucket, which is what I'd call like a passion or dream thing. So it's a passion project, just don't lose money on it. Or if you do lose money on it, make sure it's not enough that it kills other P&Ls.
That you have to sacrifice something else.
So I think we tend to work in those three buckets to say, okay, which one does this play within? And you then define success based on different things. So if you're in revenue, it's financial, you're playing off of percentages and net fees. If you're playing in the positioning, okay, how's that moving the needle for us? Like, what is the differentiation that we're trying to play here? And if it's a passion and a dream play, like, how's that fueling you as an individual? Because what your passion might be isn't going to be my passion. Yeah. So if you say you want to work with that brand and do that thing, cool, that's great for you. Make sure it fuels your passion and your fire that you're trying to kind of like, I guess, yeah.
I get it. Like, basically, there's different successes for different things.
Yeah.
And I got it. This has been such a great conversation. I think the last few things I want to touch on before we get into the quick fire round. The first one is, you mentioned like the most difficult thing being the people, right? Hiring, firing. What would you say is the most rewarding aspect of being a founder?
Same, people.
Yeah.
I think it's a double-edged sword. It's like a blessing and a curse at the same time, in the sense that watching people grow, watching people kind of improve their life and improve their skill set and everything that goes with it is so satisfying, because other people can have different, like we were talking about, passions and whatever. That's kind of the thing that motivates me, is, okay, seeing other people grow in those spaces. And I remember a few years ago, I think it was 2019-ish time, so very pivotal year. One of my colleagues, Warwick, who's been with me, I think he was employee number 2, and he bought his first flat, and that was such a kind of like a thing that we were both working towards to help him to kind of get to that position. And I think that's like the best part about it, like seeing him live through that, and now seeing other colleagues like Charlie, Jordan, Juliet being able to go purchase their first home, like step onto that ladder, which is, like, we all know it's like the hardest thing to do, like living in London especially, is honestly the hardest thing to do. So seeing those people be able to do that, I think that's like the best part of this job.
I love it. And you're obviously like a very busy man. You know, I was talking about, we mentioned the fact that you haven't had a holiday in a long time, but I'm sure it's fine. Like, do you have any productivity hacks?
Productivity hacks. I think I've seen some online where it's like time yourself doing this and time yourself doing that. Personally, it doesn't work for me. I think I need to get into a flow of something. So I need to find the right environment. And sometimes that's not the right environment, isn't sometimes standing at you in the office or at home. Sometimes I find that going out for a walk, I find, okay, that's the time I'm most productive because I'm not distracted by people asking me things or being dragged into a meeting room or a call or my phone or whatever. Sometimes I think when you've got downtime, your mind's free and you're able to kind of come up with new ideas and things like that. So that's usually my productivity hack, which is find fresh air, find space, find a new environment to go into because it unlocks different things in your brain. And I think that's just me personally because my brain's so cluttered at home and in the office. Another thing is as well, to-do lists are great, right? Don't get me wrong. You need to prioritize it. Otherwise that to-do list just gets longer and longer and longer. And I think, have you ever heard of the program called Notion? Yeah. For whatever reason.
Ali Abdal, bloody hell.
Notion works really well for me where I use it as a brain dump and then I use that brain dump and I'll try to organize my week on a Sunday night. So Sunday night is my thing where I go, my week looks like this from meetings or travel or whatever. In the other areas, these are the 5 things that I need to get done this week. Okay. And I'm just not going to stop until those 5 things are done. Okay. And I think trying to organize your week on the Monday, you've kind of already lost probably the morning. By the time you get into the flow of it, it's Tuesday. I think Sunday nights are like a good time for me because it allows you to prepare and mentally prepare of like what the week's ahead.
Okay, sick. And I know this is a silly question because you're a founder, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you feel like you've got a good work-life balance as a founder?
I want to say yes because I've worked so hard on it in the last year and a half. But if I ask other people, they're going to tell me no. Right? Because again, it's so variable to everyone that my work-life balance might be great for someone else, but it might be terrible for another person. I think what works for me, my family, seems to be working at this point in time. They understand, okay, there'll be times where I need to travel a lot, so I'm gone. But then there'll be other times where I dedicate and I commit to these are the 2 days, like a Saturday, Sunday, or just a Saturday, or whatever else it is. I'm dedicated to you. But at the same time, things pop up. So I can plan all the things in the world that I want to plan. Something might change, and there's been instances where someone else may have had to travel and go do a shoot or something. They're ill. I'm the next best person that knows the projects I'm going. So I think, in my opinion, no founder's probably going to have.
Yeah, and but just on that, how do you, in the moments you do get, what do you do to unwind?
Before my daughter was born, cinema. Yeah, cinema was always my go-to thing. Of you can't ever be on your phone, right? The only thing you can do is concentrate on the thing that's in front of you. So cinema was like my escape. But now I think it's spending time with the family. Like having a young daughter doesn't allow you to be on your phone, doesn't allow you to be distracted. You have to focus, otherwise she's going to do something stupid and end up in A&E. So there's a lot on the line, right? I say that out of experience. There was a time that I didn't focus and ended up in A&E. So I think that's my downtime now, just spending time with my daughter and just having that family time.
This is sick. And just to wrap up, like, to anybody who's thinking about, one, starting their own thing, or two, looking to get into sports marketing, what would your key piece of advice be for them?
I think if I use the second one as the first example, coming into sports marketing, I think is a great time because there's so many different opportunities. There's so many different avenues, angles, which didn't exist before. And I think it's far more exposed, the industry, whereas before, I think when I started out, I didn't even know this thing could exist until I was exposed to certain other areas because it just wasn't an industry which was kind of talked about. But I think the world's moved on now that all the alternative career paths and choices are vocalized far more. That when we went to uni at the same time, we all taught the same thing: accounting, this. This was never an option. So I think now's a great time, but also understanding that, yes, it might be a passion of yours and it's a dream, etc., but it is a job as well. It can be a tangible career. Right? Love that. And don't just approach it as a dream, approach it as I want to be a success in this, because the more you can approach to it with a plan and a set goal and a set objective of what you want to achieve out of it, the more chances you've got of one, getting in, and two, being a success once you're in it. And then those looking to create their own business, I think definitely, like we spoke about, do research, but research in the right places, research and listen to the people that have gone down that path before, have made those decisions. Don't listen to social media, because social media will probably give you an out of context snippet and maybe something that's just not right. So I think research and going in prepared, I think if you're at a stage in life where you've had paychecks, understand what is it that you need to sacrifice for the next 1 year and work 12 months at a time to make your savings work and make the money that you've got, and save up. Don't just go into it and be like, okay, next month now I'm going to do this, because you haven't had enough time to save up. You need to save up. You need to have that security and that blanket and that backup plan, just in case for 6 months you have got zero revenue. Having that preparation, research, and finding the right time. I think sometimes people panic. Sometimes people go, oh, I need to leave this job now, or this is going to happen at this company that I'm at, so I have to do that. It's like, no. That's you being forced into it. That's not you finding the right time and the right moment to do it.
Yeah, sick. We spoke a little bit off camera, but would you say that there are like some common misconceptions about being like a founder?
Yeah.
What would you say is like the biggest misconception?
I think the biggest misconception is freedom. Because yes, you have freedom in the sense that you're not tied to a corporate entity or whatever else it might be, or an employer per se. But I think you lose so much other freedom in the sense of time, like we spoke about, work-life balance. You lose freedom, so the freedom of your mind goes. I think there was a period in time a few years ago where I was like, I wonder what it's like to have a 9 to 5 to go home and just switch off. That I've never had that experience, so I don't know what it's like. And I think, you know, sometimes when I see people out on a weekend and I'm like, they're so free in their mind, and I can see they're not tense, they're not worried about something. And sometimes there's always that worry in your head.
It could all go.
Yeah, there's always that thing in the back of your head. So not every day, but like every few weeks or something like that, something will pop up into your head and you kind of have to work through it. So I guess the closest reference I can give, imagine being on a performance review every month. At any point that can go. That's ultimately
that's the reality.
That's the reality of it, right? So I think freedom is the biggest misconception. Don't get me wrong. I don't have to ask someone for annual leave. I don't have to be like, I'm only going to take X amount of annual leave and work it like this and that.
But if you take that annual leave, that can come at an impact to the overall bottom line. So yeah.
So there's opportunity cost.
Yeah.
There's always something that's going to have to give at some point. So even with, my daughter was born in December, so many people said, oh, you strategically planned this, that when the office is closed. Obviously I didn't. Yeah. But it was a blessing, and such a blessing, because it's the only time in a calendar year where the whole world kind of just goes, yeah, we're not working.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to just focus on my daughter. So that was freedom.
Yeah.
Right. That's probably the first time in running a business I had freedom, but I was on 2 hours sleep with my daughter. But do you know what I mean? So I think that's the biggest misconception.
I love it. Where do you see the business in the next 5 and 10 years?
Good question. I'll work 5 years because I have no idea where it's going to be in 10 years. 5 years, we've now started to go global. So we'll go through like a process of like PR and whatever in a few months. But that's been my life for the last 2 years in planning, organising and getting everything together. So we've gone into different regions. So North America, we've got UK, DACH, which is basically Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Middle East. And that's now our next scaling size in terms of, okay, let's lift what we've done here globally and start to localize it in other areas. So hopefully in 5 years' time, we're in a position where what we've been able to do so well here in the UK is now replicated into other markets, and the business partners that we've got in those markets with the various different managing directors in those markets are able to flourish and have the infrastructure to be able to go and do those things and maybe fast track it. What's taken us 7-8 years, they can maybe do it in 3-5.
And with your expansion, how do you prioritize your focus, right? Because there's only one of you can't get everywhere at the same time.
Yeah, the work-life balance is going to be out the window for the next 24 months. But it's very much just supporting the managing directors in the various different regions and giving them all the tools, the advice, the questions that they might have, just making myself like super available. And I'm dealing with different time zones, right? So we've got one of our business partners in North America is East Coast and the other two are West Coast. And then I've got Middle East, which is like +3. So I'm going from +3 to -7 constantly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would just be a case of just making sure I'm available, because the more I'm not there, the harder it'll be. But that's the point in even someone starting off as like a one-man band type situation. If you're starting your business tomorrow by yourself, you're on 24/7.
Yeah.
It's not like at 5 o'clock you close your laptop and you carry on doing something else. In running your business, you sometimes have to give more to the business than you'll ever give to yourself. And I think that will never change.
Yeah.
I'm now however many years in and I'm still giving more to this entity than I'm giving to myself or my family. Yeah.
Listen, bro, this is when I said like this is my friend the founder, like you've been so open and honest. I feel like I've really it's made me shudder. Like, but I've loved the conversation. And before we finish, we've got a quick fire round.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Really, we're really gonna get to know the founder. Here we go. Money or happiness?
Happiness.
Nike or Adidas?
Nike.
Super Bowl commercial or UEFA Champions League ad? Halftime ad?
Super Bowl commercial.
Would you rather secure a single high-profile client with a large budget and demanding requirements, or work with multiple smaller clients that offer diverse opportunities and creative growth?
Multiple.
Okay, nice. Favorite book?
How to win friends and influence people.
Would you rather travel to the past or future?
Future.
Love it. Do you have a favorite saying?
Solutions, not problems.
Who has it easier, men or women?
Men.
I always get it. And then final one, outside of people that you work with already, who'd be your dream client? Can be person or brand.
Brand, I think Apple.
Okay,
Yeah.
sick. We do have a closing tradition on this podcast. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self, and would you still be doing the same thing?
I think advice to younger self is patience. I think everything, I don't know about you, but I live by this thing of everything happens for a reason and there'll be a time and a place. And if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. 100%. If it's meant to be, it'll happen, right? So I think that is definitely the thing of patience, and don't see something that didn't happen as, oh my God, this didn't happen. It's just see it as a blessing that, okay, it wasn't right for you, something else will come. And would I do this again? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
All right, bro. Before we wrap up, bro, where can people find you, the business? Do you want to plug the socials?
Business is be-engaged. So if you search it on Insta, Twitter, Google, like it's everywhere. And then me, just search my name on Google and it'll pop up.
Guys, if you've made it to this point in the podcast, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Let us know who you want to hear from next. This has been another episode of What My Best Friend Does. If you didn't know, now you know. Over and out.